Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention? Good evening. It's 5:30 p.m. My name is Foster Hughes. I'm the city manager. I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. This meeting is on the MSD, the Municipal Service District. We've got Alderman Prill and Alderman Royal here this evening, so thank you for coming. So this meeting is going to be a discussion on what the Municipal Service District is. We're going to talk about how MSDs are established in North Carolina. We'll talk about the history of the MSDs here in New Bern, some of the projects that were completed. Then we're going to get your feedback on some things. So this meeting is being broadcast on Facebook, CP3 TV, on our website, and on Roku. If you have that, you can click on the City of New Bern channel. We're also going to have this on our website later this evening. As a reminder, restrooms are available downstairs if you go through the double glass doors. We hope to have our elevator open within the next 6 weeks, and so brand new restrooms upstairs. So tonight's topic is the Municipal Service District. This is an informational meeting. There are no decisions that are going to be made tonight. We're asking for your input on several things. The information received will be compiled. Our governing board will receive this information. We're going to have a survey on this as well. Any final discussion will be brought before the governing board, and we'll probably have a hearing as we move through this process. This is not going to be a quick process, so we're going to be talking tonight. We're going to come back in a few weeks for a follow-up meeting. Then we'll end up going to the governing board maybe a few weeks after that. So just want to give you an idea on how that's going to go. So we've got a PowerPoint that you can follow along. We do have an MSD site on our website at newbernnc.gov, and the best way to find that is click on Residents tab. About a third of the way down, you're going to see the Municipal Service District that you can click on. Here you're going to find information about any meetings that are going to come up. You'll have the history of the MSD, the state statute establishing an MSDs, the local ordinance on us establishing an MSD. There will be some minutes from some meetings, and then there's also going to be some information on some projects that have occurred previously. You will be able to watch this meeting and any future meetings regarding the MSD on that site as well. You're also going to be able to sign up for email updates on the MSD on there. You can click a link and we can capture your information on there. If you have questions or concerns regarding the MSD, you will be able to click a link, and it's msd@newbernnc.gov. That will come to us. We'll also make sure that our governing board receives that information. As a follow-up, this will also be on video demand on Roku and YouTube as well. Our follow-up meeting, after we compile some information we received from you, is going to be on Thursday, June 15th, right here at 5:30 p.m. For those that were not able to attend tonight, we do have a good crowd, so we're glad you are all here. We'll cover a lot of this again and then some of the comments that we received from you tonight. So what is a municipal service district? It's basically a special tax district. It's a boundary that's set. Normally the governing board will set that, and in this case we originally set a smaller boundary and then that expanded. And so the governing boards can designate certain projects within that MSD district, and those projects are established by North Carolina General Statute. And that statute was established back in 1973. And so some of the projects that you can do with MSD tax funds include any service, facility, or function which the municipality may provide in the city, including but not limited to placement of underground utility wiring, street lighting, street signs, street furniture, landscaping, specialized street and sidewalk paving and improvements to rights-of-way that preserve the character of the historic district, downtown revitalization projects, urban area revitalization projects, transit-oriented development projects, drainage projects, sewage collection and disposal systems of all types, on and off-street parking facilities, watershed improvement projects, and conversion of private residential streets to public streets. We have a really good video that was created several years ago on the MSD. Susan Moffett-Thomas is on there, and she talks about a variety of the projects that have been funded with the MSD. We're going to talk about some of those shortly. It talks about how the MSD was set up as well. And so that is also on our MSD site. We're not going to show that to you tonight, but you can click on that link to watch that. So basically, the history of our MSD is in the late 70s as the downtown businesses started gravitating over to the MLK corridor and going into the new mall. The citizens here saw a need. We needed to do something to the downtown. So in 1978, after a variety of citizens and business owners came to the governing board, they requested that a tax district be set up. The original footprint was basically from Broad Street to what at that time was Tryon Palace Drive, which is now South Front Street, and from Hancock Street over to Craven Street. In 1985, an initial MSD advisory committee was appointed by the Board of Aldermen, and they were tasked with studying issues and potential projects within the MSD and to make recommendations. In 1986, after presenting their findings, the advisory executive committee was never reconstituted. So after that time, basically a group of interested business owners, and it was normally the Ward 1 alderman would get together on a regular basis to talk about potential projects. Well, according to my attorney, that's what we're going with. To talk about potential projects, and then that would be presented to the governing board for approval. So the current footprint, and this is most recent as of 2014, the MSD goes from basically the other side of Broad Street all the way down to the Trent River, and portions of the other side of Hancock Street all the way over to the Neuse River. That's basically the footprint, as you can see. In that current footprint, 30% of those properties are residential, 70% are commercial, and that includes nonprofit, churches, governmental entities as well. And just for a reminder, nonprofit and governmental entities do not pay the MSD tax. So let's talk a little bit about finances. For fiscal year FY 2024 budget that we're budgeting for right now, the anticipated revenues we're going to be receiving is $421,200. And those revenues come from the MSD tax, which all the property owners pay. It comes from property leases from the farmers market and the parking leases. So we have 3 parking lots that we have been leasing traditionally, so all those revenues go to the MSD. The expenses for next budget year are transfer to fund balance of $242,152. Debt service on 2 outstanding loans is $107,000. Parking control is $42,000. And then miscellaneous other services about $29,500. And that's basically to maintain the Cub House, keep that clean, maintaining the fountain at James Reed Lane, making sure that the trash cans are treated with things to prevent the rodents from getting into them and things like that. Currently, the tax rate for the MSD is 0.1375 cents per $100 valuation. That valuation as of April 6 was $183.5 million. So the revenue neutral tax rate calculation is projected to be basically 11 cents. And that's what we are recommended to the governing board. So 1 penny on the MSD tax rate is equivalent to $18,350. So in early 23, during a work session, Alderman Prill made some comments about the possibility of bringing together a committee for the MSD again that the board appointed. And so we did some research, and so I made a presentation. In our research, we saw that currently there are approximately 74 MSDs throughout the state of North Carolina. And we saw that they were managed in a few different ways. One of them, by statute, is advisory boards. The other one is no advisory board at all, which is basically how we have been operating. The third one is to contract out to a Main Street or a downtown economic development group to do that. Several cities have done that. Several have advisory committees, and several have no committees whatsoever. A lot of the MSDs have a variety of formulas for how they appoint people to these boards, and some of them could be the largest property owner, it could be a certain number of restaurant owners, retail owners, bar or late night entertainment, and there's also a percentage of residential property owners that could be appointed. There was really no rhyme or reason on how many served on a committee. We saw anywhere from 5 to 16 or 17. So that's something that we'll be talking about, and I'm definitely interested in hearing what everyone else has to say. So in our proposed recommendation to the governing board at that time, it was, we look at appointing 30, we've got 30% residential property owners, so if we did 10 appointments, 3 property owners residential and 7 from businesses, broken down into what I just talked about, whether it was a hotelier, largest property owner, retail, and things like that. And then appoint ex officio members, and that would include the city manager, the finance director, the executive director from Swiss Bear, the Ward 1 auditor. That's what we recommended, and then we had conversations that we wanted to invite taxpayers of the MSD to come, and we really wanted to get in the weeds to see what you had an interest in and go from there. So the first thing we want to talk about and get your comments on, and Colleen is compiling the comments, we're going to have all of these comments on the website as well, is what are your thoughts on how an MSD committee could work? How many is the right number? And go from there. So this is going to be an open forum. I am going to ask you, since this is recorded, to just come up. You can stand right here and just face back to the crowd and have your conversation. So who would like to step up first and just give us your thoughts? Don't be shy. Yes.
I'm Lorraine Robinson. I've lived in downtown New Bern for nearly 50 years. I have a business in downtown New Bern as well, and I am here to, my question is, what other cities of about the same size as New Bern have these MSDs? What form have those MSDs taken? Because you've mentioned that there can be different kinds of forms. So I'd like to know more about the models for cities of New Bern size.
So Salisbury has one, Hickory has one. The model that everyone really likes is Wilmington. And they look at the largest property owner. Wilmington's a lot bigger than us.
Right.
But they've got a really good model in how they've done that. So now Erie has one. A lot of the cities do have municipal services. City of Burlington does. Burlington does not have an advisory committee. They operate like we do. So we see it all across the board those 3 ways. I think that Salisbury has their Main Street group to operate that. Is that correct, Lynn?
No, I'm not. I'm honestly not certain if that's the case.
There are several Main Street groups that do operate. The city basically contracts out with that.
Okay, thank you.
And we can have some examples of what cities are actually doing and put that up so you can.
That would be very helpful.
We're happy to. Come on.
I just had a question before I could have a comment. Could you say what's the difference between a committee and a governing board?
So the governing board is our board of aldermen. They are elected by citizens of New Bern from each ward. This committee would be basically appointed by our governing board to serve for a certain period of time, whether that be 3 years, 5 years, an unlimited period of time. It's really going to be up to the board to determine, but we'd like to hear your comments on terms as well.
I need to say who I am, or?
You can, sure.
Rick Rouse, I live here on Pollock Street. My biggest concern through all this, regardless of which way it goes, is that's all visible. That's my biggest concern. Who's on the committee, agendas, minutes, what's the projects, the money being spent, all that should be visible. That's my biggest comment.
Okay.
Thanks.
I was just going to mention that 2 cities that are relatively close to us that do run it the way that you were asking about are Sanford and Smith.
Sanford and Smithfield, or what similar to us. Okay. All right.
That's right. Can you just expand on the Wilmington model?
So with the Wilmington model, I think they had 15 seats. And so they appointed the largest property owner within their downtown district. They had a certain number of restaurant owners that are on that committee. They had a certain number of hotel owners that are on that committee. They had a certain number of residential property owners on that committee. Their depends on the conversation we have with them.
Well, shouldn't it be that people who are like paying the fund have the most amount of say as to who's going to represent them?
That's one reason we got you here tonight, because we want your comments. So, and if you say that, we're recording that. So. Yes.
A couple of observations. Number one, I agree that I think that's a good model. My experience with committees is that once they exceed 12, they become unwieldy and very function. So I like the idea of holding the number down rather than expanding it. The other observation is that I've lived downtown for 25 years now, and my belief system says that the residents who live in the MSD area have been profoundly underrepresented. Just look at the growth that we're going through now, which has nothing to do with residents.
Foster, can you repeat that?
We cannot hear behind.
Come on, Bill, we're going to say it.
My wife and I have a bed and breakfast on Pollock Street. We've been there for 23 years. We lived on Broad Street before that for a couple of years. And my experience is, number one, the model is a good model, the number is a good number, meaning if it gets too large, then the committee doesn't get anything done, because they just eat too many opinions. Okay, this would focus it better. And I like the idea that a lot of this would fall under the hat of our current alderman, because I think he's a good man who wants to be representative of his district. With regard to my concern is that in the 25 years I've lived downtown, I don't think the residents have gotten very much representation. And our current growth is proof that the residents have gotten almost no representation. I mean, if we take a look at the unenforceable noise ordinance, for example, and the proliferation now of bars and restaurants as opposed to wonderful curiosity shops, that's a concern. And that's a form of growth that I think is going to, in the long run, causes trouble rather than causes benefit.
Of course, you didn't hear me. I'd like to know what triggered this meeting tonight. For over 20 years, I've been paying taxes and never received anything by mail, and now I see there's $421,000 going to be spent the next year. What projects do y'all have that are demanding that this thing continue and not sunset at some point?
So we're going to be talking about projects in just a few minutes after we get through the committee. And the topic was brought up earlier this year when we were having a work session with our governing board. The MSD came up. That's how this came to be. Any other questions or comments on the committee or composition or anything?
Thanks, Foster. I'm Johnny Robinson. I own a building on 206 over at 206 Craven Street. One thing, talking about the committee formation primarily, the notes I took down, in my opinion, of how you'd want to look at this. First off, I think you need to make sure that the largest 2 or 3 taxpayers are given the opportunity to serve on a committee should they wish to, because they're putting a lot of skin in the game, and it really comes down to they're a large piece of that pie. Can you tell us what that would be percentage-wise of your revenue for the 2 or 3 biggest?
I cannot. Well, we can provide it.
Okay, it would be a good idea. And I know people have different LLCs and stuff like that, so it would be wise for them to have representation, should they wish. And some people may not want to do anything. They may wish to be silent. Another thing is, I agree with what you're saying, keep it fairly small. You know, you don't need to have too many ideas, otherwise it starts to become counterproductive and nothing gets done. The number I had on here was 7 people, 9, 10, that's amenable, I think. And I think personally, I don't think the government employee should be on there, because ultimately you guys are the judge, jury, and executioner when it comes back to the board. So, Mr. Brill, Mr. Boyle, you've got to say so what happens eventually. So you should have a position on that committee. Now, are you welcome to come to the meetings? Absolutely. But I just don't think it's not worth occupying a seat with government employees. And I also feel like the nonprofits, true churches, if you're not paying into the system, I don't think that should be a seat. So, let's see here, what else did I say? And I think also, the less formal you can make this organization, the better, because like I said earlier, ultimately, these fine people behind us they're elected, they're the judge, jury, and executioner on what happens. This is a committee. It's a recommendation. It's nothing more. And let's see here. What else did I say? It's really a brainstorming committee. That's my last note I've got on that purpose. So you come up with ideas, you show it to them. If they like it, they do it. If they don't like it, they send it back. So that's it.
Is a committee was appointed by a government organization that all fall under the Open Meeting Act and all of that?
Yes, it would.
Can't be too informal. You still have the legal obligations of that committee.
That's correct. Come on.
I thought I would just take a few minutes to talk about the history. I'm looking around, Ernie Richardson, probably John. We are the longest-serving people who have been involved with MSD. I got involved with MSD in the early 90s. Steve and I have owned property in downtown New Bern since 1983, and we've been paying the tax since then. And throughout all the years, this was really brought together at Swiss Bear's request. It was property owners, when Swiss Bear was formed, coming together because the city fathers kept saying, we have no money to invest in downtown. Downtown was dying. This is what was happening. So from there, the MSD was formed, and it was a small amount of money at the time. And Mr. Hartman, who was our manager 3 or 4 times ago, he was a genius about leveraging money. So what he did was figure out how we could take the money and borrow money to make things happen. So Swiss Bear was the driving force behind MSD. Susan Moffett called the meetings. I know you talked about the alderman, being there, but the alderman wasn't always there. It was really the city manager always came. You had the planning director, and Susan ran the meeting, and she had a chair. It usually was the chair of Swiss Bear. And the meetings were brought together to talk about what we could do to improve the infrastructure in downtown New Bern. And so what happened from that came the urban design plan. And some of the funding for the urban design plan came out of the MSD funds. And that gave us the footprint to figure out what we needed to do in downtown. And that was the streetscapes, the utilities underground. And so that's what we are still paying off today. The funding that you saw up there, the amounts of money were to retire that debt. We've been retiring that debt for the last 20 plus years. And we had to do it by blocks. We started, 1 block, and then 2 years later, 3 years later, we got to another block because we had to wait till we had enough money in the fund to leverage it. So that's how these projects have worked throughout the years. Now we're getting to the end. The last 2 projects that we're paying off are Hancock Street in front of the Civic Theater, Pollock Street in front of the Civic Theater, and I guess that's the 200 block of Hancock Street. Those were the last 2 projects that we did. And so that debt is being paid. But there's still many projects to do. I think that the MSD has been spent very wisely. Can anybody here name one thing that's happened in downtown infrastructure-wise that they don't think is successful? I don't think so, because all of our properties have benefited from it. Our town has benefited. We've brought people into our community because our streetscape is beautiful, and we were able to we've bought the street banners, the Baxter clock, benches. I could go on and on with things that we have done with the funds throughout the year, and I think it has worked and worked well. I have no issue with the breakdown, 70-30. I agree with Mr. Robinson that if the church isn't governmental, which they take up a large footprint, believe it or not, they do have a large footprint, that they should not have a voice in it. But it has worked. I would prefer to see it under Swiss Bear, because they're the ones that drove the projects. They were the ones that came and worked with Mr. Hartman, planning director, whomever, to say this must take place through a plan or whatever. And if the funds are there, then we can certainly use the funds to pay Swiss Bear. There was a time in the early 2000s up until about, I think, 2005, that the city of New Bern did use MSD funds to pay Swiss Fair. Many people don't know about that, but it happened. They paid, it was $50,000 that was coming out of MSD going into the Swiss Fair funds, correct? Ernie? So there was a time that that did happen, and maybe that's the method. I would almost like to see us go back to that method. But I have years of information I'm happy to share with. There was never, when we did this back when Susan was running the meetings, there were no notes. There was not really an agenda. We'd get an email and say, Mr. Hartman has a project he wants us to talk about. And we would gather together and talk about the project, and then Mr. Hartman would bring it to the Board of Aldermen, and they would decide whether they wanted it or not. And then Ernie was the last chairperson under Susan when Susan retired, and then I stepped in. And it just so happened that I had the hat of the alderman when I stepped in, so it wasn't necessarily that the alderman had anything to do with MSD. It was just, that's what happened. I was an MSD taxpayer. But at that point, I did start doing an agenda and notes, and I would send that out to anybody who's interested. And then as people would say to me, hey, I want to know more about MSD. Richard, I saw you one time and you said that to me, and I said, come on. And anybody else who asked about it and would just come on. But it is a public process. The Board of Aldermen have never spent one dime in the MSD that wasn't put before the public and was on a public agenda, and people could speak to it or ask about it. But it is all there, and it needs to continue to be there. I don't want to see the MSD making the final decision. I think the Board of Aldermen, it is a taxing situation. We elect our aldermen and our mayor to do that, and I think they should vote on it. And I'm happy, again, if anybody has history questions, I've got a book this deep, and I'm happy to share any information with anybody who wants it.
Just to bring this question, you said it used to be under Swiss Fair. It wasn't then just Swiss Fair being represented.
No, they would call,
Correct.
They would call the meetings. Would you say that? I want to make sure I'm correct. Yes. They would call the meetings. Susan Moffett would call the meetings, work with Mr. Hartman as far as whatever the project was. Urban design plans, we did 2 of them. Funds came out of MSD for it. You know, banners, when we put the beautiful, the red and gold banners, we had those were purchased with MSD dollars. She would say, we need to have a meeting to vote on if we want to go forward with this. And, you know, I would say, in all the years, was there anything that nobody didn't want that was brought to us? I don't think there was anything that we ever voted, you know, said, don't do it. Right. You know, we purchased the property, the famous Talbot's lot. We purchased that piece of property, and believe it or not, there were 3 buildings on that property. And we were in a hurry to get that property because we were going to do something and actually bought somebody out of their lease from that property and, you know, got the buildings torn down, and then unfortunately it sat there for about 20 years. But those were the kind of discussions that we would have in the group. Susan would moderate that, lead it, bring it to us, and we would talk about it, and then Mr. Hartman, who attended all the meetings, would then bring it back to the Board of Aldermen. We sometimes had an alderman that would attend, but rarely.
So it sounds like it's accurate to say that I believe was a subcommittee of Swiss Fair.
Correct.
Not, it wasn't Swiss Fair meetings.
No, that's correct. It was not a meeting, but it was Susan, as the executive director of Swiss Fair, came up with the projects, brought them to us, and did that. That is correct. That's how it worked.
So do you can work the other way around, the other way around? Still has, obviously, Swiss Fair representation on the bench or even committee.
Well, they are the downtown, you know, Swiss Fair is the Downtown Development Corporation. That's who they are. And that's what their mission has been all these years, is to redevelop downtown into a thriving place for people to live, work, and play. And that's what, you know, we've accomplished over these last 25, 30, 40 years. We've accomplished that. But we still have more things to accomplish.
Not just in terms of getting input, in terms of what kind of projects and whatnot. It shouldn't necessarily come from one individual within Swiss Fair. It needs to.
Well, a lot of it came from the city manager saying, we have an opportunity, there's a grant, or we have an opportunity to do this. Can we use MSD funds? What do you think about MSD funds being used? So, again, those were the you know, the kind of ideas. And Swiss Fair being the leader for the renovation and redevelopment of downtown, it was a natural way because the city planning department at that time didn't have an economic developer or anything like that, so that was an arm that was used. Lynn, did you?
I was just going to say, cities, you know, with MSDs, it is an option to put it out to any organization.
Correct.
Or an RFP to be able to manage it on behalf of the city. Oftentimes it does go to Main Street organizations, but it doesn't have to. And it doesn't even have to be awarded to a nonprofit. It can be awarded to a for-profit organization. There's no limitations in terms of the statutes with regard to that.
That is correct.
And the projects do not necessarily just come from the bill. I've been on the thing on this concession. Projects didn't necessarily just come from Bill or from Susan or Doug.
Yeah, Doug.
It's all a communal thing. Many times we have meetings about why don't we do this corner instead of this corner, or this block instead of this block. And sometimes it becomes a quotation, and we go somewhere, sometimes it goes to bid. And how much is involved? I think big things are projects, where the money comes from. And that's in everything. It's worked well over the years. Like everything, needs some improvement. Numbers on the board, you know, numbers, which people have. You either like it or you don't, have group likes it, have it. 10 is a good number. The break between the residents and the commercial is a good mix. All of them, they got the taxes, what some money is expensive. I don't know how legally you can do it any other way, or should do it any other way. And all of them means the group, the board, not one person who's in this district. That has too much problem with stacking together in our local area, which is something like that. It needs to be, and I think it might just be agreeing to giving up that authority on something that's going to exist.
Thank you, sir. Yes, come on.
I have a question. Has there been any discussion amongst the board and the city officials about what are reimagining what the central business district looks like? Post-Florence, post-pandemic. I mean, these are all critical issues that we haven't discussed. You know, we're looking, of course, historically, that the MSD Committee had worked, but what are we going to be talking about in the future? Right? What does the central business district now look like?
Right. Great question.
It's really interesting stuff.
Great question. Very minimal to this point. The governing board has given us direction to work on a strategic plan and look at some comprehensive planning citywide. So that is going to be coming up, and that will be addressed. But yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any, yes, Lynn?
But MSD funds can only be spent within that tax range.
That's correct. Within that boundary. That's correct. All right. Any other questions or comments on the committee itself? All right.
Foster, could I jump in real quick before you move on to the, potential projects? And thank you all for attending the meeting this evening. As Foster indicated, there will be a follow-up meeting scheduled next month, so I would expect and hope that all of you, as well as additional MSD taxpayers, will attend that meeting. I just have a quick question, a quick show of hands of how many of you would be interested in serving on an advisory board? Okay. And thank you. I anticipated a lot of hands going up. So it'll be a process to identify those individuals who ultimately will serve on an advisory board if that's the direction that we end up going. So I hope that you can appreciate that whoever is chosen, it's not a slight to those who are not chosen to serve initially. There will be terms of office to allow rotation to take place. on the board, which I think is a healthy thing. So thank you for your interest in being willing to participate. I look forward to this board, being set up as soon as possible, and I think the Board of Aldermen are looking forward to having your recommendations on future projects. So, thank you, Foster.
Also, I forgot one thing while I was up there. I thought I was talking. Speaking of John Robert, let's say John Robert was on the advisory committee, and today he's on the advisory committee. 6 months from now, he sells one property. Does he still have a stake in the committee? I think there ought to be some kind of a burnout time in which you're not a committee member. Maybe it's 36 days to get your place replaced. That makes sense.
Great point, thank you.
Okay, well, we just do the next official members have.
In some committees they do, and some they don't. Traditionally, when we do something like this, we really don't have a vote. We make comments, but we're there to listen, really.
Another question was, important point that there's several large property owners that are not citizens of Newbern, do not live within our city limits. I don't want them to be restricted because they have invested in our downtown, and just because they don't live in our city, they shouldn't be on us. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration, because typically our board only appoints from the city of Newbern, and I think that would be a game stopper for me.
And that's got to be a consideration, since the property owners are the ones that are supporting this MSD. John?
I would take exception to the idea of rotating terms, because I think the largest property owners have the largest stake and may not necessarily rotate off. There will be a natural rotation as property changes hands, or is improved, or degrades, whatever. But I think that needs to be considered, or maybe a certain threshold level, something.
A lot of unique things we're going to have to really work through, but all great points. All right, any other questions or comments? Yes?
I just want to make a point that although nonprofits are not paying into the district, the churches in the community do serve the community and do provide a lot of value. So I don't think they should be restricted from representation just because they're not paying.
Okay, all right, thank you. Lynn?
So just, I think another consideration that just needed to be evaluated is in terms of looking at residential representation. And obviously you can look at it as individual property, just individual unit property owners. There's also, large condominium complexes in our downtown, particularly Sky Sales, $36 million worth of that evaluation. So I think that there needs to be consideration, is it just going to be individual units or individual property owners, or will we be also considering looking at a complete condominium complex? So just something under thought to consider.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? All right, yes.
One last, I think that people who own their property a lot more pride in how the property looks as opposed to somebody who doesn't live there. I think a little contention that people who live here and people who are here all the time, we're the ones who really want to make things look good. We want to keep it private. I don't know, it's sort of like between an owner versus a renter. Who's going to take care of the property then? That's all.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to projects. And so Sabrina and some of the other folks in the group have talked about some projects. This is not all-inclusive by any way, shape, or form. So past projects that we're aware of: streetscape improvements such as wayfinding signage, improved street lighting, utility conversions, sidewalk upgrades, improved facilities and maintenance, Bear Plaza, Cub House project, operation maintenance, James Reed Lane, inner core paving improvements, development of alleyways and off-street parking, installation of trash and recycling containers, landscaping, and a lot more. Also property acquisitions. So the Talbot lot was purchased. It was also sold recently, and those funds went back to the MSD. The South Front Street and Hancock Street lot, it was actually the old railroad property right on the corner. You can see a picture of that. Purchased that a few years ago. Most recent projects and services include parking control officers, of course, the clubhouse operation, operational support such as cleaning and disinfection of the James Reed Lane fountain and some other areas, new trash receptacles, tree pruning, which we recently completed, lighting of, okay, now we're at the proposed projects. Now, we have gathered information from several folks, visitors that have stopped by, staff have brought this up, so it is not all-inclusive, and we really look forward to hearing your comments on these projects and some potential projects that you may like to see. Some projects are small, some may be a lot bigger. So lighting, additional lighting for sidewalks, public parking lots, and LED enhanced crosswalks at certain locations. For safety, security cameras, for example, around the traffic circle, the inner core parking area, James Reed Lane, Bear Plaza, Middle and Pollock Streets. Dedicated police officers at certain times of the day for public safety. Dedicated trash pickup at certain hours of the day to pick up trash. The crosswalk upgrades, thermoplastic brick pattern. So one of the, and this is mine really, because this is one of the biggest pet peeves I've got for downtown. We've got a kind of a poor painting job around our crosswalks, and for such a wonderful community that we have, we'd like to have nice, crisp lines and things. The brick crosswalks are very nice, but they're very expensive. These crosswalks, we need to have some type of reflectivity to help with the safety of our citizens, and so you'll see an example of a thermoplastic crosswalk. This is not painted on. You may have seen some stamp patterns in some other downtown areas where they put epoxy paint on it. That wears off after time. Something like thermoplastic, it's got the glass beads in it for reflectivity. That stays on for many, many years, and it can be toned to any color and looks good. Larger street signs on traffic signals. That's the number one biggest complaint we receive from folks that visit us. It's hard for them to find the smaller signs, and looking at putting larger street signs on the cross arms where the stoplights are. Adding some amenities such as bike racks, pickleball courts. We received that today. I will say on pickleball courts, we are looking at installing pickleball across the street from Cedar Grove Cemetery beside the splash pads. I think there are about 6 courts that would go in over there. An exercise trail along the Riverwalk, bench swings at Union Point Park, flower planters on select corner posts, downtown sound system, and not blaring loud music, but providing information and things like that. Bench dividers on our benches, having dividers so you can't lay down on those. Replacing the historic downtown banners. As you'll see, a lot of the banners downtown right now are the gold and burgundy banners. It's time to replace those, and there's a cost for that. Maintenance and repair, repainting our light poles, restriping stop bars, sandblasting powder coat trash cans that need to be taken care of, repaving the Pollock Street lot. Some property enhancements include farmers market upgrades, replacing the garage doors, upgrading the restrooms, and replacing the ceiling fans. That is a city asset. The farmers market pays their monthly rent to the MSD. So while the Farmers Market Association is responsible for maintaining that, as a city, we need to make sure we look at the integrity of that building also. The railroad property, which is between the Farmers Market and the History Museum, that's always been an unsightly area. Looking at possibly enhancing that, whether it be with additional landscaping or plantings and things like that. We've had conversations recently with the railroad on whether or not we could realistically add some parking. Their legal is looking to see what we could and could not do, so that would be an area that we would like to look at considering. Also, parking and a pier along East Front Street. So where Broad Street comes to the traffic circle, the city has property that continues on into the river. And so developing that to have a little bit more parking, another green space a little bit, and then access to a pier for folks to fish. So that's an idea we've been exploring. The Craven parking lot, doing some upgrades on the inner core. Swiss Bear several years ago, worked on some plans. The informal committee talked about this several times. There's an expense for that, but we've heard a lot of complaints about that, how that inner core parking works, and that's something that our governing board is interested in addressing. And if you are a property owner adjacent to that, maybe you would support that. We don't know. Digital wayfinding signs downtown, having those in certain areas of downtown, whether it be on the inner block, whether we have something at Bear Plaza, James Reed Lane, at the entrance to the parking on Craven lot. A downtown master plan. So as it was mentioned, funds were used to do an urban plan several years ago. Well, it's time to do an upgrade on that. So we could look at doing that. Also, reducing the debt service on the existing debt. Currently, right now, we have right under $500,000 of debt. That's scheduled to be paid off in the next 5 years. All right, so we've talked about some potential projects there. Now what I'd like to hear is potential projects that you would like to see in the MSD, or if there are any projects that I've mentioned that you would like to see implemented, please let us know your comments on that as well. So please come up. As a reminder, this is being broadcast, and I want to make sure that everyone that may be listening as well can hear what you have to say. So please come up if you'd like to speak.
I have two ideas for projects. So if anyone's seen the visitor's guide, if you open the map up, it's got this nice little green dot that shows where you can walk as a trail. Well, that trail's not complete. We have lots of people, a lot of visitors who come. They want to walk in the morning. They want to jog. There's no way to get over the railroad on Hancock Street, even though the little green line shows you can do that. We've never completed the walkway around the Marriott and down by Persimmons. I believe that right-of-way was granted, at least that's what was told years ago. So I don't know if that's still there, but if we could complete that, that's something that a lot of our visitors, they like to do, they like to walk. That's one of the first things we always ask. The other project I would like to see is, we've done all of the sidewalks and whatnot around the MSD. The 200 Street, or the 200 block of Pollock Street, our sidewalks are the old sidewalk. It makes it look more like it's residential. I know you mentioned that. That 200 block now is mostly commercial, and doesn't really tie in well when you come to the end of Craven, you turn the block, or if you're walking from the convention center around, it seems as if we're a dead zone. Also, for guests who are getting out of their cars, they have to step over the grass area where the parking is to get to the B&Bs or to the other businesses. And again, if that was all paved sidewalk like it is on Craven and the 300th Street of Pollock, I think that would just add to the continuity of the MSD.
Thank you.
I just had some notes before, but Maria Cho, 252 Pollock Street. So, as I mentioned, implementing economic and urban planning studies, implement an ambassador program. Wilmington also has that they use with their MSD monies to increase beautification and safety in our downtown, as well as continuing to build on creating a unique sense of place for our visitors and invest in existing assets like Union Point Park and other public spaces. Thanks.
Thank you. What other projects?
Spigots along the street so that store owners could wash their storefronts.
So I think we may have, did we have that on that list? I know that Lynn Herrick will call me about that today. Basically, water spigots in certain areas of the block. So, right now we are coming through twice a year to pressure wash all the downtown sidewalks. So having spigots to where the business owners can basically hose off the sidewalks in front of their business. That's what they're referring to. Right, sure. Or wash down your building or your awning if you have one. What other projects?
Well, you've you've said it on your list, but I just wanted to point out, one of the biggest things I think are docks. Because it's a hard time if you're coming downtown, if you want to come by boat. And we're fortunate we live on two rivers. I mean, somebody from Fairfield, somebody from Trentwood, somebody from River Bend, somebody from Pamlico County, somebody from Moorhead might want to come down here and come by boat. And there's not many places to dock. And I think the more you can spend in that aspect, I think it's going to pay back. Now, it's also one of the most expensive things out there. So, I mean, at the end of the day, downtown is an economic driver. And that's what we want to try to promote, is people to come downtown, spend money, and then leave.
And along those lines, at Union Point Park, we do have three docks that we replaced from Hurricane Florence damage. And in most days, there are several boats that are tied up to those. So that does show that they're being used, and we appreciate that.
A big example is Swansburg, we got out here, was that a lot of
Okay, thank you. What other comments? Oh, come on, don't be shy now. Okay, come on.
We've come a long ways in all of this, there's no question about it, I think everybody recognizes that. But one of the things we've always had a struggle with is reminding the city of New Bern that our tax dollars are not supposed to support our MSD money, is not supposed to do all these projects, and we're supposed to get some help from the city. We're the only district in the city that has a special tax. So in all of this, we need to remember we need cooperation and we need to work with the aldermen, and they have to spend some of their money on their projects. Because you can't do most of these projects by yourself with what we pay in tax, the special district tax. So any groups that you appoint, it's another reason I said the aldermen need to appoint, got to be people who understand that and who have the ability to work with the aldermen and remind them that they do have obligations to downtown New Bern as well as the rest of the city. And it's always hard to divide the dollars up, and there are communities that have more needs than others. But that is something that needs to come in this format, and everybody needs to understand.
Yeah, sure. I think we can, and I think we can, because like I mentioned earlier, there was a great video that was done back in, it was 2017. And so that is currently on our MSD site, and we will be updating that as well to include additional information, because I've talked to some folks that have just purchased property downtown, didn't really know how the MSD tax works, and so I think it's important that we expand on that to let you know exactly how that does work and what the purpose of those funds are for. Sure.
I even say that MSD tax, I mean, we got a war chest right now, which is great, and we got a lot of money to pay for levy projects. Why would that be enough? Yeah, from my perspective, my MSD tax that I pay is about 1% of annual revenue, and I'm pretty sure I get more than 1% back, as far as what I control for.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
As part of some other projects, I went to several cities, Alderman, and so the point I'd like to make is New Bern is very unique and different than all these other cities. So it's no broad brush. Greensboro, what they're doing makes sense, but they have
Thank you so much.
Foster, also, I know the other core is kind of a tough, it's on the list, it keeps on getting kicked down the road because of the kind of owners that are involved in that. But with the restaurants and bars that are opening up, trash is there, this has become a bigger and bigger issue. I was asked and put that on the high priority, if not losing vision, or not only focus on that, still needing to get the top and continuing to discuss and try to figure out some way of getting that to work out.
Absolutely, yes.
I would ditto that same thought and consider as well that putting the recycling bins or the garbage underground.
That has come up several times. What other comments? Do you like some of the projects that have been recommended and discussed this evening? Any that you just absolutely did not like, thought of? Okay, that's good. Well, that's exactly right. And that's what the purpose of this committee would be, to prioritize, look at the funding that is available and determine what you would like to recommend to our governing board on that. Yes.
Something that Mr. Richardson commented on was what I understood to mean not saddling this board with so many projects that maybe could be spread out with other things. I attended another meeting, I'm relatively new to town, but we came here for many of the things that, I don't need to say why we're here, but that my understanding is Swiss Fair, and I would say thank you, but policing is one thing, very important. Safety is, of course, very important to all of us, but I don't want these important things to be strapped with, with this committee to be strapped with something like that that seems like should be spread out and funded in other ways. But I would also piggyback on what I believe this gentleman and this gentleman said regarding how the city is changing with the addition of some of the new establishments that have just come in, really changing, and I hope that some of those problems will be addressed as a downtown resident. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so we are going to have a survey that's going to go up, and I hope that all of you had a chance to put your name on the sign-in sheets that we had out here, because if you did, you're going to be on our email list. We are going to have another meeting on June 15th to come back and revisit and hone down some of your recommendations as well, and we have some other MSD property owners do attend, so we can get their feedback as well. Then we'll continue to move forward. Been having conversations with Alderman Prill, and there is going to be a Ward 1 Town Hall meeting, and we're looking at doing that later in the month of June. And at that time, I'm sure topics are going to be discussed such as noise, trash, social district. That's always something that continues to, sure, smoking. Any other issues that the Ward 1 and downtown property owners or residents may have. Want to hear what folks have to say, so that can also help us prioritize how the city works with the downtown community. I want to thank you all for coming. Again, this is going to be on our website. The video tonight will be on the website. We're going to continue to add some things based on what you all said. Any of the feedback you have, we're going to provide that documentation as well. If you have any questions for us, the easiest way to reach out, our website, newbernnc.gov. You can sign up there. You can also send an email to msd@newbernnc.gov. I'll receive that. Our city clerk will. Our public information officer will. We'll push that information out to our governing board members so they're aware of some of the comments that you may have. We're glad that we had such a good turnout tonight because we want to be as transparent as possible, and we want you to be involved in this process and have a say in how your tax dollars are going to be spent. So if there are no other questions, thank you for coming. And Alderman, anything you'd like to say?
Just thank you all again for coming tonight. Look forward to seeing you next month. And don't hesitate to reach out to the city with suggestions.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.